So, another thing that was talked about in this week's readings was the idea of literacy in a variety of forms. And one of the ones I want to highlight today is visual literacy. So, visual literacy is essentially learning to analyze visuals and images so that we can differentiate between the obvious and the underlying message slash messages, right? So, this is something that we'll explore throughout the next few weeks. And I think it's important for us, especially given that we live in a world with so many different types of visual stimuli, that we really start to think about uh, the ways in which we can become more literate in that way. So, why is it important for us to be visually literate? I think because it helps us understand that reading extends beyond the traditional page. And we definitely need to think more deeply about photography and illustrations, right? Because we see a lot of them, and it's important that we begin to think critically about all the different ways in which ideas are interpreted. And this includes other visual mediums that we might not often think of. I think painting and illustration may be a little more obvious, but even the idea of logos or architecture, right? All of these different visuals are communicating messages. To give an example, I remember that I used to teach at this other community college, and when I was taking a tour, one of them pointed out that the architecture of this particular building had been designed by the same person that designs prisons. And I remember thinking, what? That's crazy. And yet when I looked around, I realized how sterile the environment was. And I thought about the ways in which whoever was designing this was perpetuating systems instead of facilitating creativity. So there are different elements that we can use when we think of visual literacy, and these, I'm just going to highlight a few of them because I think they're important for us to think about as we look at different videos, particularly if you start to look at certain sources that are not traditional print, right? And it's these elements of foreground versus background, like what is closest to us, what images and words are closest to us, and what is kind of being used as a backdrop, right? The use of color and the ways in which certain items might symbolize other ideas, the frame in which something is shown to us, whether the image is true to life or something abstract, and then of course the different associations we may have regarding a particular image or portions of a certain image, right? So if we're looking at this particular image, which is an ad, right? We can see that the yellow tape, "Where will disaster leave your business?" is in the foreground, right? And that's signaling some type of alarm. And in the background, we have these ominous clouds and this idea that a storm has just passed through. And of course, in the middle is this building or this business with this sign that says "We've moved," and it points towards this dumpster, which makes it sound like the business hasn't relocated to another place, but instead is now demolished, right? It's sitting in the dumpster. And the colors reinforce that, right? We're looking at all of these grays, and that gray makes it feel very sullen, right? And then the use of red for "We've moved" brings a pop to that sign, right? And that's attached to the dumpster, the color of the dumpster. And obviously the dumpster symbolizes wreckage or trash, right? In the same way that the yellow tape when I think of it, I think of like caution tape or crime tape, right? So that's definitely doesn't have a positive connotation. And the frame of this, right? The what is being shown to us is a controlled image, right? They don't show us what's to the left of this building, or what's to the right of the dumpster, or what's on the other side of the parking lot. All of that is an image that is controlled by the advertisers because they want us to focus on this particular thing. And the fact that there are storms, right, that do occur makes this a true to life, though alarming and sad, it does make it a true to life image. And depending on what you've been through, you could feel like, oh, this conjures associations of another storm or a hurricane, some type of major event that has happened that really signals to us that there's some type of tragedy. So depending on what you've been through or where you've lived, you might have these associations. Or if you ever had like a fire of some sort, right? So these are just some elements that we need to pay attention to. And what we'll do in the next video is we'll take a look at these elements and we'll apply them to another image.